I'm a 34-year-old woman, and I've been married to Eric for 3 years. He's 36, works in software, and has a calm way of carrying himself that makes people trust him instantly. I met him through work. He's not flashy or loud, just steady, respectful, and always thinking of others. That's probably what drew me to him in the first place. But for my family, those traits never seem to matter. My family's definition of family is very specific: bloodlines, shared holidays, and names that go back 3 generations. It's about who sat at the kids' table in 1999, who helped clean up after Grandma's 60th, and who played shortstop in the backyard every July. If you weren't there for those things, you're not really in, and Eric wasn't. He didn't grow up with us. He didn't know the nicknames. He didn't get the inside jokes. So from day one, they treated him like he was temporary. At family dinners, they'd set out place cards like it was a wedding reception. Every name was written in perfect calligraphy, except his. Sometimes there was a blank card. Sometimes someone would scribble one with a ballpoint pen just before we sat down. At first, I thought it was a harmless oversight, but it kept happening. When we took group photos, someone would always hand Eric the camera. No one asked him to get in the shot. At my niece's birthday, my brother stood up to introduce all the spouses by name, except Eric. His name wasn't forgotten, it was skipped. There was a beat of silence, then he moved on to cake. Eric never made a scene. He'd quietly stand back, smile politely, and whisper that it was fine, that maybe he just needed to give it time, that they'd warm up eventually. For years, I believed him. But last Christmas made it impossible to ignore anymore. My father handed out engraved cufflinks to both my brothers-in-law during dinner. Everyone clapped, said how classy they looked. Then he turned to Eric and passed him a tie. It still had the clearance sticker on it from the department store. The price tag was hanging off the side. Nobody said a word. Later that night, my mother brought out a velvet box. Inside was the family heirloom bracelet, the one she had always said would go to the next daughter-in-law. She gave it to my sister-in-law, who'd already received 1 year ago when she married my brother. When I asked about it quietly in the kitchen, my mother said, "It felt right. She's part of the family." My father walked in mid-conversation. He added, "Eric hasn't earned his place yet. It takes more than time to be considered family." They weren't angry when they said it. Just matter of fact, like it was common sense. What they didn't know was that Eric had overheard everything. He'd gone to the hallway to grab our coats and caught the entire conversation from behind the wall. He didn't come back in. We left without dessert. The car ride home was quiet. He didn't speak. He just looked out the window like he was trying to memorize the night sky. When we got home, he went straight to bed. No argument. No breakdown. That made it worse. I stayed up. I walked around the apartment picking up wrapping paper scraps, half-used ribbon, things we had planned for weeks to bring to that dinner. I looked at our wedding photo on the bookshelf, the one where my dad was standing stiff and awkward in the back row, barely smiling. I remembered how that photo almost didn't happen because my mother kept asking if we wanted a separate one. Just the real family. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started typing. I titled the private document, "Show them." Not in anger, not for revenge, but to make it clear to myself that I wasn't going to shrink back into their small definitions anymore. I wasn't going to wait for a seat to be offered. I was going to build the table, one where Eric belonged before the meal even started. That document became my map, not of how to get back into their circle, but how to build our own, one that wouldn't require permission slips or blood tests to enter. I didn't know what all the steps would be yet, but I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to explain my husband to anyone ever again. And whatever came next, they weren't going to see it coming. A few weeks after Christmas, my cousin Melanie got engaged. She called me that weekend, excited, and asked if I'd help plan the wedding. I've always been close to her, so I said yes without thinking twice. We started a shared calendar, exchanged Pinterest boards, and even toured 2 venues together. It felt like a fresh start after everything that happened during the holidays. But 2 weeks into planning, I found out that Eric wouldn't be invited. The guest list was being kept small, and they were only allowing what they called recognized spouses. I didn't understand at first. Eric and I had been married for 3 years. We weren't dating. We weren't engaged. We were legally married. When I asked what recognized meant, Melanie said her parents were worried Eric wasn't really close to the family, and it might be awkward. That night, I sent her a short message thanking her for the invite but letting her know I was stepping down from helping. I didn't explain. She didn't ask for one. 3 hours later, my dad called. He started by asking why I was making a big deal out of nothing. Then he moved on to telling me how much Melanie looked up to me and how I was letting everyone down. I asked him a simple question: if Eric isn't welcome, am I? There was a pause, long enough that I checked my phone to see if the call had dropped. And then he said, "You're always welcome, but that doesn't extend to everyone you bring." I made it clear that I wouldn't be attending any future events where my husband was deliberately excluded. The call ended there. 2 days later, my mother sent a group message to the entire family, siblings, cousins, aunts, everyone. She wrote a long paragraph about how hurt she was, how I'd changed, and how I was letting my marriage cloud my loyalty. Her last line read, "Don't disown your blood for convenience. It never ends well." I left the message on read. No replies, no back and forth. That door didn't need to swing anymore. The week after that, Eric's mother had a health scare. She collapsed at her home, and the neighbors had to call an ambulance. We caught the first flight out and stayed with her while she recovered. It was a rough few days, multiple checkups, prescription refills, cooking meals she could digest. We didn't sleep much. Not one person from my side of the family reached out. They didn't ask if we were okay. No one checked if we'd landed safely. Nothing. My phone stayed silent the entire week. When we got back home, my sister hosted a baby shower. I wasn't invited. She made it public on social media though, so it wasn't hard to see the photos. I scrolled through them while unpacking our suitcase. There was something strange about one of the guests, a woman I hadn't seen in years, Eric's ex. She and my sister weren't even friends in the past. I knew that for a fact. But there she was, in one of the photos, chatting near the cake table like it was normal. like she belonged there more than Eric ever did. That was when it clicked. They weren't just ignoring him anymore. They were replacing him, one photo at a time. I didn't text my sister. I didn't confront anyone. I just closed the app and kept unpacking. That night, while sorting through our mail, I opened an envelope that turned out to be a wedding invitation from one of Eric's coworkers. It was a simple card, nothing fancy, but it got me thinking. I sat down at the kitchen table, took out the show them document I had started weeks ago, and added a new line. Post a vow renewal. Not for attention. It's not to spite anyone, but to make a statement. A quiet one. A clear one. I wanted to create a space that wasn't built on old rules, old roles, or old names. Just us, and the people who had shown up for us without hesitation. Over the next few days, I started sketching out the details in a notebook. It wouldn't be some big, flashy event. No long speeches or staged family photos. I wanted warmth. People who brought food without being asked. People who hugged Eric first when they saw us walk in. People who didn't need reminders that he was my husband, because they never forgot in the first place. I hadn't told Eric yet, but I knew this was the right step, not as a reaction to what we'd lost, but as a way to honor what we had, and who chose to stand with us. That moment, sitting alone at the table with stacks of junk mail and empty suitcases around me, felt more like a beginning than an ending. And this time, we'd be writing the guest list ourselves. I spent the next 4 months planning the vow renewal in complete silence. No hints, no social media posts, no group messages. I wanted it to be ours from start to finish, clean of drama, untouched by obligation, and filled only with people who had never once made Eric earn his place. I used my year-end bonus and dipped into our savings. Not for something extravagant, just something thoughtful. A vineyard 2 hours from the city caught my eye while browsing venues. It had no connection to my family, no overlapping history, and no lingering shadows. The hills were green, the wine was decent, and the staff answered emails quickly. That was enough. The guest list wasn't long, but it was honest. Eric's sister and her kids. 2 of his cousins who had driven 10 hours just to attend our wedding years ago. My college roommate and her husband. A couple of Eric's co-workers from his old job who still checked in every few weeks. And 2 of my cousins, the only ones who had ever treated him like he belonged at the table. Everyone invited had passed one simple test. They never made Eric feel like an outsider. I designed the invitations myself. Cream cardstock, navy font, and across the top in bold, chosen family celebration. I printed them on our home printer and sent them out in batches. When Eric saw the sample card on the kitchen counter, he picked it up and stared at it for a while. No questions. Just a look I hadn't seen in a long time. His sister called me 2 days later in tears. She said no one had ever formally invited her to anything like that. She offered to cook something, help with setup, anything we needed. I gave her a few simple tasks, nothing stressful. She ended up organizing